of the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District is called to order at 7:10 p.m. This is the board workshop being held on July the 16th of 2020. We have a quorum with all members present. The next item on the agenda is audience to patrons. Ms. Vossick, do we have any?
Yes, Madam President, we are now at the portion of the meeting when the board allots time to hear persons who desire to make comments to the board. Persons who wish to speak to the board must sign up to do so as they arrive, and they must indicate the topic about which they wish to speak. No presentation shall exceed 5 minutes. The board will hear the concerns, but the board cannot deliberate, discuss, or make a decision on any subject that is not posted on the agenda. Persons who speak to the board cannot complain about a district officer or employee in open session. Such concerns are heard in closed session after proper posting of the agenda item has occurred. As you come forward, please state your name and your address. Our first speaker is Sarah Ryan.
Hello, I'm Sarah Ryan. I'm here representing Lamar Classroom Teachers Association. I'm coming to you this evening as a teacher from the district and as a president of Lamar Classroom Teachers Association, our local chapter of Classroom Teachers Association. We represent teachers, paras, nurses, counselors, and many more who are on the front lines with students each day. We came into this profession because it was a calling, not because of the glory or to become a millionaire. I want to begin with a hearty thank you for all of the hard work that went into creating a plan for the 2021 school year. I know information from the state and federal levels has been delayed and is ever changing. Your ability to work within a difficult situation has not gone unnoticed. Many of the teachers and staff in LCTA have expressed their agreement with the plan set forth on Wednesday, where parents can select which model of learning they feel will work for their children and their family. There are some areas of concern from teachers, though. We need more information, and we need it now. On Tuesday, the board had a nicely bound book of at least 75 to 100 pages that they referenced over and over. It was expressed that the information from that book would be added to the website for teachers and parents to use to become more educated on the plan for the 2021 school year. On Wednesday, when the web page opened for viewing, one found 9 links to documents with information about next year. A book that was 75 to 100 pages had been reduced to a few pages with much repeated information from link to link. We would appreciate if the full copy of the book could be shared with our staff COVID resources page. This would allow teachers to read, learn, and better understand what the next school year holds for us and ease many teacher fears because we will better understand the plan. You would not expect us to follow a campus handbook we had never seen, so please do not expect us to follow guidelines we have never seen either. I put out a simple Facebook post today that said, "What questions do you have after the announcement this week?" And I received back 40 questions within a few hours. No ugly remarks, no snide comments, no arguing about what was set out, was it right or wrong. We were curious when the updates from the subcommittees would come out as well. There were many mentions of subcommittees are working on that, and we would hope to have that information as soon as possible. Teachers are planners by nature, and we are already into time to plan for next school year. Please share the full plan with all staff so we can ready ourselves, our classrooms, and our families for the new way we are going to be educating in the fall. We also asked for a set reduction in class size. No matter how many children go to the virtual classroom, without a set smaller class size in kinder through 4th grade, one could have a regular class size of 22 or even up to 24, as is the usual now with a waiver, and 5th through 12th grade could have unlimited numbers. It is too much to ask a teacher to keep the same size model for her classroom when teaching process and classroom protocols have completely changed. It will be nearly impossible to socially distance students by 6 feet if there are too many in one classroom. Please allow the campuses to hire another teacher or a para more easily so the class sizes can remain smaller. Less children and adults together in one classroom all day, the less germs will be spread from multiple households. Finally, we ask you to consider allowing more vulnerable teachers with higher risk themselves or who have a high-risk family member to truly teach virtually and not be required to come to a building daily. A teacher with a brand new baby or an elderly or immunocompromised family member in her household or with risk herself should not be forced to come to campus and be exposed to so many people when she could teach virtually from home. Accommodations could be made to assure that the teacher is teaching during the assigned hours for school and that she could attend meetings virtually. If a teacher can teach at home during a quarantine if there was a positive case in her room, a teacher can do the same thing on a day-to-day basis and keep her and her family safe. Again, we thank you for all of your hard work that went into this plan, and we hope you will consider affording us a few concessions that would make this transition a bit easier. Teachers look forward to the fall every year, and this will be no different. We are just going to pivot as needed and continue to be the one for our students, community, and district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Don Hopkins.
Good evening, Dr. Randall and school board members. My name is Dawn Hopkins and my address is 2215 Leisure Lane in Richmond. I come forward tonight to talk to you as a concerned teacher. I'm very proud to be an LCIS teacher since 1997. My professional organization, Lamar Classroom Teachers Association, regularly meets with Dr. Randall to discuss questions and concerns of staff. I have the utmost respect for Dr. Randall, and I know by his words and, most important, his actions, that he is committed to our staff and our students. So thank you, Dr. Randall, for all that you do. Thank you also to the school board for all of your thoughtfulness in making decisions for our district. I would also like to thank all of the committees who have worked tirelessly on guidelines for our return to school. There are many concerns that I and several other teachers have. I think it would be beneficial, like Sarah said, if we could have access to the board book that was talked about on Tuesday night's meeting. If that could be emailed to staff, it would be greatly appreciated. I watched the meeting on July 14th, and I also have read the return to school guidelines online. A few concerns that are prominent from teachers are, number one, the potential lack of in-person subs if a teacher has to be quarantined. Number two, we have teachers who are already at risk, and we are just asking if it's a possibility for those teachers to teach virtually from home to limit their exposure. Number three, it is still very confusing how sick leave will be used if a teacher has to be quarantined. Number four, in case we all have to teach virtually again, can we please have the principals use some or all of our 8 staff development days prior to instruction to have meaningful guidance on how to be more effective with online teaching? We all did our very best working together for distance learning in the spring, but it was basically ineffective for teachers and students. So if we could have more guidance on how to be more effective for our students, that would be greatly appreciated. Number five, many lower grade teachers feel that their students should be required to wear masks in class also because many kids who get the virus do not show signs or symptoms. Number six, we are very concerned about class size. We realize that August the 9th is the deadline for the commitment, and we hope that all the parents will be able to do that. So class size, of course, is one of our main concerns. Again, thank you to all the committees for their diligence for our return to school. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all, Madam President.
Okay. So, Dr. Randall, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam President. This is a board workshop where the staff will go over some information. I know that there were board members who wanted to have a little more detailed on what the recommendations were. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the staff and we'll walk you through the 2020 bond planning.
All right, good evening, everyone. Where we left off was an update from our Citizens Bond Advisory Committee where they provided a recommendation to the school board. And just a quick recap, the original district recommendation was just under $877 million. The Citizens Bond Advisory Committee removed the event center, orchestra rooms, and land. The Citizens Bond Advisory Committee added Travis Elementary Library upgrades, Lamar Junior High and George Junior High football field upgrades, 1621 Place expansion for additional classrooms, Ray Elementary additional fencing, and Huggins video access controls near the portables. So if you recall, the 2020 bond proposal has 8 primary categories, and at this time, we're going to turn it over to facilities and planning, and they will go through each of those categories and answer any questions that the trustees have.
Good evening. As Dr. Rockwood stated, we have broken down the CBAC proposal by category. We will review each category and answer any questions you may have. We will also have a representative from that impacted area to provide assistance in providing additional information regarding that category. A quick reminder, as we did the facilities assessment, they were placed into 4 categories. The facilities were assessed and identified. P1s are identified as must-dos, and they are with a life expectancy of 1 to 2 years until their expiring life cycle. P2s were 3 to 5 years, P3s were 6 to 10 years, and P4s were 10 years and more. The current proposal from the Citizens Bond Advisory Committee is for P1s only. As we look at the first section for new facilities and land, there were 9 new sites for construction that were recommended by the committee, 8 of which were tied to increased student population, with the 9th, the police station, addressing the transition to the formation of the LCISD Police Department. These facilities and associated land purchases accounted for almost $519 million of the committee's recommendations.
Good evening, everybody. I wanted to go on as far as that last slide, and it did state a new stadium, which is a second stadium that has been proposed, and how we got to that number. And what we did was we took and estimated at 2020 dollars that we would be sitting at 66.9 million, including all soft costs. So that's your construction and all your costs for architectural fees, surveying, material testing, the whole thing for the whole project. And then every year we estimated a construction cost increase of 8% the first year, 7% the second year, and 7% the third year. So we're proposing at bid date at 2023, that's where the 82.7 million came from. And from that, y'all had asked also to kind of give an estimate, what does that look like? And so we kind of, as an example, we took Clear Creek Stadium, which is Challenger Stadium. Challenger Stadium bid in the year 2014. So by taking the dates that we know and the construction cost increases that we know up to 2020, we brought that project up to a 2020 dollar, and then went through the estimates of what we think the construction cost increases will be to the 2023 dollars. And so just for a Challenger Stadium, we would estimate that that would go at 88.8 million. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we got our numbers from. And then I've got a couple of slides just shows pictures of Challenger and what that looks like. And so this is an outside view of Challenger Stadium. And then from the field looking up, that's the inside of Challenger.
Aluminum seating?
It does have aluminum seats and concrete floor, yes. And so this first section, we'll go over some interior, and I wanted to just open it up right now. We have 2 slides on interior, and if you have any specific questions on these projects, we're prepared to answer those questions.
Mr. Computer, would it be easier for us to ask questions on each project as we go along, or for you to do the presentation and ask them?
You can ask questions as we go along, yes, sir.
On the stadium, how does that stadium differ from trailer?
Well, Trailer Stadium is an old construction, and you have to look at what we have at Trailer Stadium. Over the years, we've added several things to trailer. So it will be a new structure. What we have proposed is a concrete structure with the aluminum seating. And the differences are mainly that it's new, because it will seat 10,000. Trailer Stadium seats a little bit more than that. It's 10,500, I believe. And it will sit, also what you have to look at is it will be outside somewhere else. And so all the utilities and the land improvements will have to be in that project. So still have a field house, still have concession and those type of
As
things.
far as parking, will it have about the same parking capacity and whatnot?
It will have, well, according to code, we will have to add parking to fit the 10,000 seat stadium.
There's a formula that they follow when they design it for capacity.
So it will have everything Trailer Stadium has, is what you're trying to say.
Yes, ma'am.
It'll have the field houses, the track,
You'll have a field house.
have a field house.
Our proposal does not include a track.
Oh, okay. So,
Why does it not?
And I'll have to ask Nick,
Nick,
Ms. Nelson.
she's
to-
right there.
She is, she's waiting.
Currently, each of our high schools has a competition track at it. And for a track meet with the size stadium that exists at each high school, we can host a track meet. With Trailer Stadium, we've got enough space with the track there to host a district-sized track meet. We didn't feel we needed another track facility the size of a stadium with 10,000 seats. So we felt that with this second stadium not being on a school facility, we did not need it to have a track as well.
So there's no plans to add it later, it's just not gonna have one?
Not
No,
necessary.
It's not, we don't need to spend the money on something like
Is there anything, without going into the fine details, I mean, like a scoreboard or anything like that that would come back, be added to a second stadium at a future bond or a future out of the general fund? It's not a part of these numbers.
There's always things to add.
And I'm not getting into the minutiae
Well,
of it, I'm
and
saying,
and
is
so
something
if you go
stick
to a
out?
Challenger Stadium, you're gonna see a big, large video scoreboard. That is not in our proposal. We have a normal scoreboard similar to what we have at Trailer, but not the big video scoreboard. It's a $2 million scoreboard. We did not put that.
The difference between what we have at Trailer Stadium and what they have at Challenger is Challenger can live stream. They have a video production suite as part of their press box. And it's one of their CTE classes. They have a staff member and a student group who actually produces live video production during their events there. We don't have that infrastructure yet. Our scoreboard at Trailer Stadium has the capacity to add that module. And it's not really that expensive. We sized the scoreboard that we upgraded about 3 years ago at Trailer to the base that we had at Trailer. We got the largest video board we could fit on the infrastructure we had there. And we have the ability to put recorded video up at Trailer Stadium. So in the past 2 years, our student groups have been able to create, they call them hype videos, that they play as the kids run out of the tunnel. We've sold yearbooks. We've done advertising for our student organizations. They've made their player introduction videos. We've done highlight videos from the game before. So we have video capability with what we currently have. We have not gone to a full live streaming video board at this time. But with putting in a scoreboard similar to what we have, we would have the ability down the road, if we created that CTE program, to add the module to the scoreboard that could allow us to do that.
So if I remember, Mr. McKeever, during the bond committee hearings, someone asked what kind of construction this was, and I think you said, correct me if I'm wrong, that if it wasn't a concrete stadium and it was the alternative, whatever that might be,
You can go.
it would be $5 million less roughly, is that correct?
If we went from the concrete proposed stadium to a steel structure stadium, we could reduce $5 million.
5 million.
Yes, sir.
So I am no expert on inflation and all that, but your the numbers that you guys ran said basically Challenger Stadium built in 2014 was roughly $44 million. And to build that same stadium today would be almost double that,
The same stadium, we built it in 2023.
2023. Because
That's
this bond
correct.
would pass in 2020 possibly and not be built until 2023.
Correct, that's the current timeline.
So it'd be 9 years later, it would basically double the cost.
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
What's the benefit of concrete construction that justifies the $5 million cost?
And I may have to punt to our architects for an answer like that. Concrete is less maintenance. With the steel structure like we have at Trailer, we have to have a structural engineer come in and survey that stadium to make sure that everything is still intact and well. Concrete is not as severe for that kind of inspection.
Do you know what the cost annually is for that maintenance on Trailer? Just for the inspection of the steel structure?
I don't know, sir, I don't have that off the top of my head, but it's probably in a couple of $1,000 range just to have that engineer come out and look.
So we were all at Legacy Stadium, which was opened a few years ago, and I think it was around $70 million. Other than the scoreboard, what other differences would we have in our new proposed stadium and a Legacy Stadium, if you're familiar with Legacy Stadium?
I've sat in it. Legacy is a very nice stadium. The differences are the size of the press box, the size of the field houses, the size of the numbers of seats for Legacy is higher than 10,000. And I'm not sure exactly, it's approaching 15,000. I'm not sure exactly we can get that. But so that whole facility is much larger, just for the capacity of the stadium.
And Kevin, is there a difference between the concrete makeup of Legacy and Challenger?
Challenge is a little bit of difference, yes, sir. Challenger has some structure, steel structure, but most of it's concrete and steel kind of combined.
Could the architects maybe talk to, because when I hear it's $5 million for concrete, but it's only a couple $1,000 in maintaining the steel structure.
Well, that's just for the inspection. That's not really maintaining. If there's something that were to be needing to be done, that's added on to it.
Does that happen often at Trailer?
And you might be able to answer that more than I know every once in a while we do have to change out some beams and things like that because they may get bent, and they do have to do that from time to time. They always going through and retightening the aluminum seating and the planks and things like that. That's something that's an ongoing deal.
That would be, excuse me, that would be more of a safety factor.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think there has been issues in this way in the past where we've had to close sections because they weren't safe,
We have to do, yes.
if
We
I
have had-
recall.
Yes, ma'am, we have had to do that, and then come back and they change out those planks or fix the bracing under it or something like that.
Did you want our representative here from PBK?
Well, actually, Kevin was spot on. It's mainly a maintenance issue, and there is additional maintenance for the steel structures. Additionally, if you're designing a 50-year stadium, you also eventually you will have rust. You will have components that are galvanized or painted components that have to be replaced and addressed. With a concrete stadium, you also have a better seal for the entire slope of the seating hole. Underneath, you don't have the leaks in the, whether it's coats or whether it's rain or whatever else, it's leaking down on the concourse. You have to deal with that with aluminum stadium also. There's noise issues with aluminum seating stadium as well. That's a preference issue, of course. Some people don't like the noise that you get from aluminum stadium. The biggest issue is the maintenance issue and the ongoing maintenance when you look at a 50-year facility.
So just in terms of 50-year stadium overall cost, you feel pretty confident that we would get a return on investment for doing concrete versus the steel structure?
That is the norm. That's the general thought. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay. Do you have one?
No, Jen.
You said that this newer one would seat 10,000, and right now trailer is 10,500. Is that correct? Why would we make a smaller facility? If the older facility says, I mean, it's old, and there may be some things come up, why wouldn't we go to the 10,500 capacity?
And I'm gonna just go by, cost per seat and how, just estimated cost per seat at 10,000 is a general number. We could go to 10,500 without any issue, but it would raise the cost.
Well, that's understandable, but I'm looking at something old, and it holds 10,500, and that capacity works for us.
Now, what you also have to look at is what code compliances are.
Okay.
The stadium at Trailer is designed and has a capacity of 10,000. But nowadays, when you design a capacity of 10,000, the code and the distance between the seats and things are bigger. So 10,000 is a lot easier to get to in capacity. And you can still put 10,000 in Trailer, but it'll feel more comfortable in the new stadium.
I'm almost wondering the opposite. Why are we gonna build a 10,000 seat stadium? Why are we not gonna build a 6,000 seat stadium that could accommodate possible outdoor graduation ceremonies in the future? I have been to a lot of the Lamar football games, but I've never seen that stadium maxed out. And I don't know if that's something that happens frequently or infrequently, but that would be my question. What was the thinking as opposed to building maybe a smaller stadium?
Mr. Welch, a lot of it depends on how well they're playing.
So
We've had a number of games where we sold out over there. So, and in fact, turned people away.
Sold out in the sense of there's 10,000.
10,000 and, well, it may be more than that because you have some standing around the side and, in the facility itself.
Sure.
I think to remember too that a seating capacity of 10,000, remember that the student groups you have that take up those seats during the game, you've got the band, the drill team, other perform groups, et cetera. So when you look at the number of patrons who can then have a seat, it's actually less than 10,000 due to the high percentage of student participation that we have at our games as well.
And isn't it too that our side are usually filled up, it's the away games, and if I correct by what you said, eventually we could all be playing each other, so if you have two schools within the district, we're gonna be stuffed to the gills.
Our highest attendance comes when we play our own schools. LCISD schools play LCISD schools. And as we continue to grow closer and closer to each other in enrollment, we're going to see that more and more. In the next 2 years, we'll have inter-squad games, so to speak, between Fulshire and Lamar, between Foster and Terry, and we've got games scheduled between schools in different districts. Foster and Lamar are playing each other, Terry and Lamar are playing each other. So we have the potential in this coming year to have 6 games at the stadium between 2 LCISD schools.
And what happens when we play a Fort Bend school? Do they usually come too?
As Dr. Randall alluded to, it will depend how
the
each of
school.
those teams is doing, what night of the week it is, and what kind of playoff implications
Right.
are on the line.
Then I would go back to, why wouldn't we go to build something the same size that we have, that we know works, that we know can be filled at times? Why are we gonna diminish by 500? I'm not understanding that.
And
This is the distance,
Cost.
right? And it's,
But
And
it-
typically, and correct me guys if I'm wrong, but you rarely hear about stadiums being built for 10,500. They go 10,000, 11,000, 12,000, that type of thing.
So I have to remember that Taylor Ray is old, so it's not updating. Okay. The other question I have, typically I don't understand all of this, but this is the building, this is the stadium. What about the land? That's not included in that price.
No, ma'am, that's included in our land proposal for 31 million.
The land is included in
Yes,
that?
ma'am.
How much is that land allocated for? No, just for that,
The
for
purchase
for
of
the
land for
stadium.
new facilities.
Right, but I'm
That's
just
part of
wanting
the
to
stadium.
narrow it down. Is there a land projection for the stadium?
Yes, and I'll look it up here in just a minute, but
Okay.
it's about a 100-acre site is what we'll be looking for.
Okay.
So
You're saying is that already in the bond? Yeah.
it's in the bond proposal
And
under
that-
the
that-
31 million for land.
Yeah, there is money to buy the land to put this on.
We do have it now? Or
It's
that
in
would be a
the
bond?
31 million.
That's gonna be in,
And we typically break out the land acquisition separate from the projects,
Mhm.
because many times you want to do it that way. You don't want to tie those two things together, so you can get out in front and purchase the land prior to building the stadium.
Is there any possibility that the land for the new stadium could be tied to the land for another high school? So basically, like trailer, even though that was a long time ago, a new stadium would basically serve as the home field for that school, but it also would obviously be for the district as well. I mean, would that save any money? Or,
It's possible, and you do see that from some districts. Fort Bend Hightower is that way, where they have the school and they have a stadium there and they share parking. So there is a potential cost savings if that was identified.
There are some pros and cons to that. In the last bond, our Citizens Bond Council added in a sub-varsity stadium at Lamar to help alleviate the conflict of using the stadium on a sub-varsity night.
Sure.
Because Lamar was having to play all of their sub-varsity football games away because their stadium, the one attached to their campus, was being used on Thursday nights by varsity football teams to play varsity football games at. So there are pros and cons to that decision.
You have to add a track too.
yeah,
We would.
I was thinking more of the parking lot though, and just the footprint of the stadium itself. It seems like that could fit. I'm thinking of it
But-
here, I don't know.
One of the other cons is that we have a challenge with parking at Lamar. And when you've got the stadium out by itself, the only thing that you're dealing with is parking. You don't have to deal with,
Multiple events,
Well, yeah.
like volleyball games.
Right. That's a logistical challenge when you have a site sharing the high school site. Is if other events going on the night of a game, you can have a challenge.
Right now, we often use the natatorium parking lot for football games for our band buses, so we have to choreograph with our swim teams and pool rentals to make sure that we don't have those on the night of a football game as
Yeah,
well.
the
So
the
it's a-
district's done an incredible job of shoehorning, all the people that are going to that area. And this whole facility over there was built, what, 1949 or something? And
Original
we're stuck with
construction.
that. So I would assume if we went out in the middle of nowhere and built a school, we could purchase enough property to alleviate some of those. But I don't.
That's future.
It is possible too that if we got enough land that we could build the stadium and then the transportation center and or the police station on that same land, possibly save some money that way.
We could sure look at that as well.
The challenge we have is finding large parcels of land in a location that's advantageous to the needs of the district.
It's gonna get harder and harder in Fort Bend County.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And they see us coming. Thank you.
Any other questions about the stadium? Thank you, Ms. Nyson.
Now we're just showing you the, what was proposed in the interior projects. And I'm prepared to answer any of those specific questions if you have any on interior projects.
The Travis Elementary, they added, okay, this is everything you're proposing, but
Right.
the bond added,
This is also what
oh,
the
is that
committee
all in
has-
there? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. If you look
And
at Travis.
they added the expansion of the library?
Yes, ma'am. And I do have a full
We
plan.
actually have a schematic of what that would look like.
This is how we propose, currently at Travis, where the new classrooms are, is where the library is. And so in order to really expand that library, we moved those classrooms from the north side of that hallway to where the library is currently, and then expanded the building and built a new library. So now you would have a 4,300 square foot facility for your library.
Is
So-
that library out of compliance now? Is that part of the problem, or they just didn't?
It is very small right now. They do not have any storage. They have some little offices, but it is very small.
And what is the size, number of students in this?
Travis capacity is
last year.
680, I believe.
Okay.
They're not that high yet, I don't.
But that's the capacity of the school is
Yes,
680?
ma'am.
Did they get a new gym recently, or?
No, ma'am.
Because I thought someone talked about the gymnasium too.
We did talk about that in some of the comments at the Citizens Bond advisory meetings, was about another project that we talked about was building a new gym and a new music room and moving that library into the gymnasium. But overall, the committee decided that this was the project that they recommend.
Overall, what's the stability of that school for the long term?
Travis Elementary?
Because it's how old? It's one of the oldest schools.
It's a 49 school, original construction. It's been added onto in different
I know.
times. And matter of fact, 1995, this classroom wing on the right side was added. That's when I came here. That was one of my first projects, so I know that one well. But so it is still a sound school, but it has some age.
What about
A
Taylor
little bit of an
Ray?
understatement there.
Is Taylor Ray and Travis about the same?
No, ma'am.
No.
Taylor Ray is built in the late 70s, early 80s.
79 is when it opened.
79. It's a different construction. It's a tilt wall constructed school.
It's one of the stucco schools.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we had talked at one time, is there some way we can combine them in that area?
Original, if you remember, that school was built as a
Middle school.
middle school. It was an intermediate school.
That's right.
And an open concept.
Yes,
That's what
ma'am.
it was when I was there.
What's the
Intermediate.
Renovate Technology Development Center?
Okay, the development center, if you remember, graphic arts used to be in the development center.
Kevin, you
until-
might want to change that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. We all want to think that we,
Okay. The graphic arts used to be in the development center, and then when the service center was completed, graphic arts moved to their new home in the service center. Technology is now in the development center. So what this amount is renovating the technology, the development center for the technology department.
That was one of the questions that the Citizens Bond Committee had too. It was a little confusing. It's not for additional technology, it's to renovate the building for technology services to use.
Is this the one that's on the end of Lamar High School that once upon a time was the
administration.
administration building?
Yes, ma'am.
Where I was hired.
Yes. And I do believe
It needs renovating.
a couple of y'all went on a tour of the facility. It does house one of our NOCs, so it is kind of one of our technology hubs. And this is an item to renovate and bring that space, to freshen up that space, make it more usable.
I have a question from one school, George Junior High, and I'm jumping the gun, I think, because this is interior. I have a question about the exterior.
Let's finish.
So we just wait. I want to know about the tennis courts.
Okay.
Are there any other interior questions on this list?
Yeah.
Yes?
She can go, I'm trying to collect my thoughts over here, because I wanted to ask a question. Let the public hear the answer on one or two things. Go ahead, Catherine.
Oh, no,
Oh, she's waiting.
I think the question I have is
Exterior
going to go to the next section.
In the book, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of renovations that need to happen to things like ceiling tiles and LED lighting through a lot of the schools. Can you speak about that a little bit? About why those need to be replaced, or
Well, the LED lighting was, when the evaluation was made, LED lighting at our older schools was identified as we need to move from the fluorescent lighting to LED lighting. There's really two reasons for that. One, they're driven by the current energy code, our international energy code, that is moving towards LED lighting for energy conservation. They're much more energy efficient. That kind of goes hand in hand, that as facilities and construction all moves to LED lighting, it makes fluorescent lighting more difficult to procure. There will be a time when, sadly, fluorescent bulbs will no longer be available because everything will have moved to LED. So it was identified throughout the district at areas that didn't have it, and one of the things we looked at was doing that system-wide during one bond. That process is going to take a long time as it is to change those campuses out. So we looked at more of a phased approach to take our oldest campuses and make those P1 priorities to change those out. So if this process it would not change out all of our schools that currently have fluorescent lights to LED in this bond.
And how about the ceiling tiles? There's a lot of things for ceiling tiles, and that's not just replacing it leaks a little bit. You have a discolored. This is a whole renovation, from what I understand.
Well, one of the things you see in ceiling tiles is that, and you see it a lot in older schools, is that some of the ceiling tile, even the 1x1s, you can't find those anymore. So when you get to a point where you need to replace ceiling tiles, they're not available. So at that point, you replace the grid and you do new drop-in ceiling tiles that are more recent, of the proper sizes. Our maintenance routinely changes ceiling tiles every day.
Sure.
For whatever reason, but that's more of an entire ceiling would be replaced.
Wertheimer Middle School. I was looking, it says investigate sanitary service lines, provide safe and secure entry. Can you describe what is the issue with that safe entry? I thought we had that pretty well down pat for all the schools.
And I'm gonna look it up real quick because I have some details about Wertheimer. We do have a vestibule at Wertheimer, and
Okay.
this was coming from the school as a school, the principal questionnaire. This was making their entryway a little bit more inviting as a safe and secure entry. That's where that came from.
At the school's principal's request.
Yes, ma'am. Are we on exterior?
Interior.
Okay. Oh, there it is down at the bottom. And so that's where that came from, and so adding, whether it's a video access control or things like that would be, and it may be also, all this says here is provide a safe and secure welcoming entry, and it's more of an aesthetics for that.
So the issue, it's safe and secure, it's just something they would prefer.
They do have a safe and secure vestibule, and it forces
Okay.
people, when you walk in, to go into that office.
Go straight into the office. You can't
Yeah.
go into the school.
Yes.
And those sanitary service lines, I guess I didn't understand the word investigate. We either have a problem or we don't. Is that too simple?
Well, we have been investigating, and our maintenance department has looked at and smoke tested. Sometimes we get an odor inside the building, and sometimes we don't. And it is very hard to find it. And so that's what that is about, is to help us really dive into, do we have a cracked PVC line somewhere that may be causing this? But that's what that is.
It just seemed like that was something really important rather than waiting for a bond.
And we have been, maintenance has been looking at that quite often.
And as Kevin said, it's a periodic odor that we have, but it's not where the sanitary lines are not functioning at the campus. That it's not a sanitary waste issue. It's more of, we're trying to find a periodic odor that appears. And it takes a deep investigation by folks who that's what they do.
But would this pay if they found something wrong, or is that gonna have to come back, or do we have money in, somewhere if there had to be something
I
fixed.
guess that's one of those, it'll depend on what they find.
That's what I was getting at, was,
Okay,
yeah.
but it's better to go find it early than later.
But it may be something that we could handle with the current budget, because we've been doing some of those things with the current budget, like at Williams, we had to go underneath there. At Huggins, we had to go up underneath that kitchen, and we did some things in our M&O budget.
Do something
But we're having trouble locating this one, so this would help us to get the proper expertise to do that.
I just think waiting for a bond to do this is something, okay.
I have another question. I sent Dr. Randall a series of questions, and I think he and you all helped him. Very good answers. I'd like to ask a couple of these so the public can understand a few of them, especially the three people that I put on the committee. We have an entire M&O department in this district, some very capable people. And so one of the questions that one of the people I put on the committee asked me is, why aren't these things being handled by the M&O department? Such as Pink Elementary needing water sealing and Campbell Elementary needing water sealing. Why is that a priority one in a bond? And I think I understand it from the answers you all provided. But could you speak to that a little bit?
And what that is there is water sealing, and it's the exterior building envelope of that facility. And so what's also in that P1 is a roof replacement. That's the same type of contractor that will do that water sealing and that on the building envelope as the roof. So it's better for us to go ahead and hire that contractor that's going to replace the entire roof to do that all the way around, the sides and the top, and get that building envelope addressed. Maintenance can do that, but they're going to hire a contractor similar to a roofer, and it may end up costing us more to do it separately.
So that would be the case for both of those schools, is that right? Pink and Campbell, and those?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
So our maintenance and operations department does not handle those types of things when waterproofing them, and I think that's, correct me if I'm wrong, is that what it sounds like it is? Waterproofing the school, physical building from?
It is, I think it's more the scope that you're looking at. When you're looking at waterproofing an entire envelope for all of the windows, that's different than if we have an issue at a specific window in a classroom. The maintenance department really has the staff that they go and address the issues on that scale. And we see when we have something that's a large scale, again, as Kevin said, when it's tied to roofing, that's the appropriate time to go back and do the building envelope with that group.
And if you bid it out, it might cost us less at that time if you're bidding for both.
Generally, you combine it with a bigger project, economy of scale, you're going to get that at a lower rate.
So it's more of hoping to save us some money in the long run.
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky? Kevin, when I look over this and it's roofing, we need all these roofing, and yet there's a big difference in the age of the different schools. Can you explain, how does that work? Why, to me, I'm gonna just say all of a sudden, we've got so many that need new roofs. Are we having an issue with the way they were put on?
Generally, a built-up roof, modified bitumen granulated cap sheet roof has about a 20-year life cycle. So you look at Foster, you look at Briscoe, you look at Frost, you look at Campbell. Those schools were all built and opened in 2000, 2001. Well, we're at 20 years.
Okay.
Those roofs are at the end of their useful life. And so that's what's happening. You've got I'm going to say new schools because I'm an old school guy and I've been here since then.
I bet you're right.
So those schools are in that life cycle. And there's a lot of schools that we built in the year 2000, the year 2001, 1997, 1990, that. And now, even Lamar Consolidated High School, it's got sections that are 1949. But if you remember out of the 2003 bond, we re-roofed that. There was a major project over there. And so when this bond issue, that's what we're looking at. That's how it made a P1, is because those roofs are now reaching their life cycle.
And
And
it's-
I'm just asking this because I think even for the public to understand that
Yes, ma'am.
would help.
And it's always a positive to look at that life cycle of the roof. What we want to do is replace that roof as it approaches the end of its life cycle before it begins to fail. Because once it starts to fail, then we have water intrusion issues and we can lose lightweight concrete and it becomes much more expensive if we wait. So that's how we try to stay on that cycle.
Now, Ms. Kaminsky brought up the Huggins vestibule, I think, correct?
Wertheim.
Oh, that was Wertheimer. Oh, sorry. Okay. Is that gonna be an exterior,
The vestibules,
I mean, is that gonna be on the exterior list, or is that a good question to ask now?
it'll be an interior.
Okay, so we'll
Yes.
go with that. I didn't know how that one would work. Did y'all, I had a chance to go visit after the gentleman spoke last month about his concerns with safety, and I got to tour with the principal, and so I wanted to, I believe that we talked about that y'all might have some information on what that would look like possibly, and the cost associated, and equity, and all that good stuff. There we go, look at that.
Currently in the proposal, what's been proposed is a video access system like what we currently have at Huggins. And so we have 9 facilities right now that have a need for a different type of entryway. And so that's what's listed right here. And so the $15,000 is a video access control system like we have at Huggins. The Seguin, Jackson, and Bowie, they are different construction, different types of floor plans, and so they're requiring a little bit different type of look at for their front entryway. And that's why Mr. Warren's here, Chief Warren's here.
And to clarify, that recommended column, those projects are all in the current proposal by the bond committee.
Okay,
Those are currently in the bond.
thank you. Oh, were you gonna say something? I thought you,
No.
Mr. Warren.
Go ahead, sorry. As an alternate, what we put originally in there was like a prototype that we did at Williams. In order to do that at these other schools, they don't have the capacity when you take over some of the parts of the building to do like what we did. You have to add on to the building. And so that's where those numbers came from. So then, after we talked with the advisory committee, and they had that, they voted to recommend these video access. And we heard some discussions and things like that. So that's where the alternate 2 came from, is we came back and said, okay, well, let's look at it a little different at each campus and see something that's maybe not as evasive, a little bit different than what we did at Williams. And so we did, and that's where these other numbers from alternate 2 came from. So you have the 2.6 million. Things are a little different at these schools because they're all a little bit different. For instance, where the learning stairs are at Williams, they have that the big open hallway now with the learning stairs. Well, a lot of that was because we had a design issue with a ramp that led to the stage between the gym and the cafeteria. So we had this big ramp, and you open that all up, and it's like, hey, we could possibly do a learning stair here. So that's kind of where that came from. Well, some of these schools don't have that ramp at all. They have a lift that's inside by the stage. So that just opens up a different thing to look at. And so that's what we did. And so if you look at this, this is where your Huggins, where your original office area is, and your front door right here. So what we did was we took over this pod, moved those 4 classrooms over here, and so, but you still have to add onto the building right here, create this vestibule going into the hallway, into the office and receptionist, and you have all of your office administrative staff and clinic and everything is right here. And we had enough room because there was not a ramp going to this stage to put these 4 classrooms over there. And so that's where that 2.6 estimated dollar came from. And so we went back and looked at some of these, Seguin and Jackson, Bowie, of course, they are different. But we still looked at that type of deal, just adding on to the front, but keeping the entire office together. That was our main goal, is to keep the office together. Austin Elementary School is on here also. Currently, we've changed a little bit, but all that's going up front is an area just for the receptionist. And this would keep that what we're doing now, but move the office to where they're all together at the front entry. That's what that number for.
So you would move those classrooms if you did it at Austin?
Yes, ma'am.
Where would you move them?
They would go to where the office is currently, office and
Gotcha.
clinic and all that is.
And to whatever plan we use in the alternates, you have to move the office area. That needs to be relocated.
But we're
So that's
remodeling the
where the
office
expense,
now.
wherever you move it to,
But you're remodeling.
typically it's classroom
We
space.
remodeled it.
You've got to increase that capacity and add some classroom space back.
Over here, could you go to the next slide so we can see the visioning? So when you walk in, that would be a secure vestibule area that you would have to get, you would get buzzed into the office.
Yes.
There,
Yes.
right?
And you would get buzzed into here. You would walk into this vestibule right here. Those doors would be locked, and you would be forced to come over here, get buzzed into here.
And then how, from there, you raptor in and then you go into the school, how do you get into the school?
You can either
Door right there.
go through this door right here.
And that other door space.
And then, you know, the administration area, we have proposed, this was a hallway. Now, this could get, when you get into the design and everybody on the design committees, that could get manipulated a little bit. This was just an estimate to see if we could do it.
So with this schematic, we would have the same number of classrooms, same number of offices available as it currently sits.
Yes, sir.
We're just remodeling the front.
And how long would that remodeling take? Would those classrooms be taken out of commission while that's happening?
I'm gonna ask our architect to give us an estimate on that. I'm not sure if that could be done over a summer.
It's kind of similar, Mr. Hunt, to what we're doing at Lamar Consolidated right now. You can do it a couple of ways. Like we just started construction over there now, and we've taken over the classroom space, and Dr. Williams, the principal, has allocated some classrooms, and we're building the administrative suite now. That's estimated for that high school. Would take a little longer than that, it's a larger area, so that way, it will probably take them about 6 months to do. If they got started like soon as school was out, they could probably get it done probably in November. And then they could, those classrooms, pretty much it's a shell space. Those classrooms will probably take them probably 2 or 3 months, probably 2 months, honestly, to get done. But it would be something that you would start summer, and it probably would go throughout the school year, but it would be something we could easily phase in.
So when I went over, and I know Mr. Hunt is familiar with the facility, I think we've all been there, but, so I understood that the main time that the kids cross that area is for lunch and back and forth, but nobody's allowed in the building at the time. And so, they did feel like when we added that security system, that they felt like, even the principal mentioned the front desk, the lady that worked at the front desk, I didn't get to meet her that day, she wasn't there, but, felt like it was a huge improvement and very secure. And so, I guess my question here is, if we added this, basically kind of as an equity thing, we would have to kind of roll all of them into it. So it would be kind of a package deal if we upgraded just Huggins.
Those 9 facilities.
They would all have to.
They all have the same issue.
Okay. But it seemed like, from when I was there, the comfort level was, as of what I understood.
We did use Huggins as a beta test.
Okay.
To see what type of, how it was going to work, and ask for feedback from the campus administration, as the feedback was very positive.
I got the same.
And one of the things we want to do is have Chief Warren just discuss a little bit more about what constitutes a security vestibule.
Sure, and understand that there's a couple things that you want those vestibules to do, and that is, it allows visitors to be screened before they come into the facility. It allows you to also, the district, to conduct some type of background checks and security checks on that individual. In addition, it provides some barriers so that it takes a certain amount of time for people to come in there. We have those capabilities, although they look differently on different campuses. All of our vestibules perform those same functions. but they have a different impact on the amount of staff time that it takes to do that. Just like you mentioned, during those passing periods and on these 9 campuses, either a staff, my recommendation is for the principals that they either have a staff member in those areas to make sure that visitors do not enter those areas when there's students there, or in the case with the video monitor, that they just do not open those doors.
And she mentioned that had been functioning well, you know, because the
Yes.
doors were locked at all times on either side, and while the flow is
Right, the ultimate
active,
goal is that
that-
before any
yeah.
visitor is allowed access to any student areas, they go through our systems of checks to make sure that they're an approved visitor before we allow into any area where students are.
Okay, thank you.
The feedback that I've gotten from parents is that is a major improvement, the video system. They were very grateful that it was installed, but that the concern is, there's a few. First, the only way to get to the restroom is to go through that area when you're in the cafeteria. And so there's students that are going in and out of that area, and there might have been somebody that's buzzed in, and there still is an interaction with somebody that hasn't been necessarily raptored in and made it to the office yet. Second, there's kids that are going through that area, and there's a sign on the door that says, please don't open the door. If it's an elementary school, and you've got very friendly kids that, you know, and there's some kids that might not read yet, and although they're trained on it, they want to open the door, and they think that they're doing the right thing. And then third, even though the person, the guest, hasn't made it, you know, they haven't made it to the office yet, although those doors on both sides are supposed to be closed, especially during lunchtime, those doors are opening and closing because there's kids that are going into the lunchroom, there's kids that are going to the restroom, so those doors are often open. So those 2 levels of security that we want, they're not always there, especially at lunchtime, because somebody could get, you know, they could be let in when you see them on the camera, and then they can just hook a right turn and they can go into the classroom. So I think it's much better, but I don't think it's as secure as our newer schools.
So, I have a question. This was not originally on the bond that y'all brought to, as a district recommendation, correct? The Huggins was a recommendation from the bond committee.
Yes, ma'am. What happened is we recommended to the Citizens Bond Advisory Committee
To the video
access controls.
I see that.
Then we had a question that came up from the Citizens Advisory Committee about Huggins, and that's where the 4.3 came from. And then that got voted on, and what got approved by the committee was back to the video access control systems.
Okay, so are you putting this forth to us if we want to do equity and do all the schools, or is this something?
Well, and that is it. We can keep the recommended, in which we would be adding the video access controls.
But then going to Huggins and doing what you just showed us?
No, ma'am, that's not in our recommendation.
No, but I thought that was part of the bond's recommendation.
No, ma'am.
There's
The-
just that first
the
column.
bond,
That could
the
be
bond,
added, column 2 could be, or
That's
column.
what, okay.
Just column
We
1
could-
has been recommended.
What now?
Just column 1 has been recommended.
Okay. I thought that the Huggins people had gotten that through there. I'm sorry, I missed that. Okay. So what you're saying is this is recommended, but if we wish to move forward in another direction, we as a board can add this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what I
And we
was.
wanted to provide you
More information.
more information and
Okay,
options.
okay, good, thank you, because
And-
I was getting confused.
And the level
Is
of.
that alternate 1?
I'm sorry?
2? We're looking at alternate 2?
Are you-
Recommended column is was recommended by the Bond Advisory Committee.
Uh-huh.
The other columns are just there for information for the board if they wanted to deliberate.
But
on
which
those.
one was it that you showed us with Huggins?
Alternate number 2.
Alternate.
Alternate number 2.
Yes.
That's alternate number 2, okay.
So,
Can we get that sent to us, because I don't know if I have that paper.
You're not gonna get-
Was,
you're not
do
gonna
we
get a
have
word in
access to
it.
that yet, or after tonight we will?
We will-
Is that what you're asking, Ms. Dancer?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
You haven't, but we will have.
Can you, okay, yeah, after this.
Okay, thank you. Put it with all my.
You don't have it right yet, you're
Okay,
good. You're-
okay, that's why I was looking for it.
Right.
Okay.
Well, actually, you do.
Oh,
Oh,
yes,
I
you
do?
do.
You have the slide presentation that's sitting at your desk.
I
Oh,
don't
they
think I
don't?
got it.
I got it.
Yeah, that's why I've
Well,
taken
you're
order.
more
I was
special than
nonchalantly
we are, I
looking for it,
guess.
but I haven't.
You will get it.
We're gonna
Yes.
get it.
You're on a higher pay grade than we are.
We have it right here. We have it.
We can definitely provide that information.
John, Mr. Welch, yes.
And the alternate one column and the alternate two column, there's a big price difference. Is the security level the same? What will
Yes.
be the difference of the two columns?
From a security perspective, those two columns do the same type of security vestibule. It's some other changes that amount to that difference in
Gotcha.
price. But from my perspective and the security of the entrance of that building, those two do the same function.
But as far as your professional opinion, you think the 427,000 would bring all the current schools up to a secure point?
They all would have a secure vestibule that meets the minimum requirements. They do not have equity among all the campuses. There are some differences because some of them require additional staffing and other areas. Not all of them have a secure or have the same type of vestibule that is created in alternate 1 or alternate 2. The video system is a different process, but it does meet the same guidelines. Is that?
Yeah, personally, I'm not worried about equity. Personally, I'm worried about a safe school building. Every single one of our buildings to be a safe school building.
All of those allow visitors into the facility to be reviewed and screened prior to being allowed access into the facility. And all of them allow them to go through our checks and balances and be raptored in. So that part, yes, they all meet the same basic requirements.
I think that one of the things that the chief mentioned earlier was that in order for it to be exactly the way that we would feel more comfortable with, you'd have to have staff that is there
Yes.
to make sure that you don't have a kid that walks by and pushes on the door and that type of thing. Whereas on the other campuses, the newer campuses, when you walk into that vestibule, you have to be buzzed inside. You can't go in any direction but back out.
And
None of these
all of the
older buildings
doors,
have.
there's code requirements on all the exit doors that anybody can leave through those doors. So there is always a potential that even any of the existing vestibules, the normal ones that you're kind of looking at in alternate 1 or 2, that you can still open the doors and get out, or they could actually be used to bypass. Students could open those doors. That's why it's an education component that we teach our students and our staff not to let people in and control those entry and exit points at all of our facilities.
It seems like there's more room for error in the recommended column than there is in alternate number 2. Because the recommended column requires a staff member, and that staff member to be doing what they need to be doing in their place, and it requires the students to be trained, students from pre-K through 5th grade, which it's not always easy to teach a pre-K or a kindergartner, hey, when there's an adult at the door, don't let them in. And there's less that can go wrong with alternate 2, so to me, it seems like that would be safer, because there's less room for operational error.
I'll agree with you that it's a greater burden on staff on the recommended level. You're exactly right that it does create a greater burden on staff to monitor those areas. Anytime you have that cross flow of traffic, if you separate that, you eliminate a burden onto the staff to monitor that.
That's the most important thing to me as a board member, safe school. That's it. It's more important than the academics, I think.
All right, moving on. Anything else on lighting?
Are y'all ready to move on off of interior?
I have, okay, yes.
One additional item on interior, and it was something that wasn't added. It has been added in previous bonds, and that's the orchestra rooms. So I wanted to see if we could hear a little bit about where there are orchestra rooms now, and then what that would look like moving forward if we pass a bond proposal without the orchestra rooms.
We have orchestra rooms on books right now that are being planned at the middle schools, Westendorf, Polly Ryan, Wertheimer, Navarro. And those are scheduled for completion in
Next summer.
next summer.
We actually started construction on those facilities right now.
Our only orchestra room in operation right now that's a designated orchestra room is at Roberts. Randall and Wright will have orchestra rooms. As part of the renovation at Lamar Junior High, we'll get a choir room and an orchestra room. So we need, for equity's sake, 9 additional orchestra rooms on all the rest of the campuses.
So this cut orchestra rooms from where?
Everywhere, everywhere that
We
they-
would have an orchestra room on every secondary campus.
Because right now, we're just building the ones on the 6th grade campuses, except for Roberts.
That's correct.
Okay, so we don't have any on the junior high until.
Lamar Junior High is in the construction
Is,
process.
they're getting one right now?
Lamar Junior High will be our only junior high orchestra room
Okay,
when it's finished.
so then, Westendorf will have one, they'll go to Lamar Junior High and have one, but they won't have one if they go to the high school,
Correct,
unless it goes into the bond.
correct.
And here, and then the other. How many students are in that program right now?
We have, in the orchestra program district-wide, we have 522 that are, we hope will show up in one way or the other this coming fall. That is up from 443 in the 1920 school year, which was up from 272 in the 18-19 school year, which is up from the original first class of 165. So we were shooting for 5% growth for 2021, and we busted through that.
Can you tell us a little background of when this program came to be? I kind of know it, but I don't know if some of the other board members know.
Well, we started the program in, got to consult my notes, in fall 2017. When I became Director of Fine Arts in 2008, and every subsequent year, there was a lot of demand from the community, specifically on certain parts of the community, for an orchestra program. We had, I found that we had a lot of families that were interested in moving out our way, but we didn't have orchestra. And those numbers started to grow. We did a pilot, we did a survey of our 4th graders, and I don't remember what year that was, but that was the year where we decided we have some demand for this. And so it was a grassroots movement.
Wasn't it
Where
out
did it start?
Campbell?
We started it on every campus with 2 teachers covering all the tracks.
Oh.
And it's grown. We added a 3rd teacher the 2nd year, and this year we have 5 orchestra teachers. And on some of our tracks, enrollment they're going to be maxed out. It's going to be on the maroon track. We have 172 orchestra students for next year. That's a little bit beyond the teacher's capacity. We're gonna have to be very creative how we deal with that.
Ram, was the program at Campbell? What program was that?
Well, we had an orchestra club at Campbell Elementary, and that's kind of what started moving this. And we would have performances here in this room from the Campbell Orchestra, and the teacher does a wonderful job. That's where a lot of our grassroots came from that one teacher, Sue Alston, at Campbell Elementary School.
What's the numbers in the blue track?
In the blue track, we have 100 I'm sorry, we have 77 signed up for next year.
Because I think it's the same teacher that teaches all three
She
schools.
teaches Westendorf, Lamar Junior High, and Lamar next year.
And I'm supposed to say I know that from a fact that she's a very good teacher.
She's a wonderful teacher, yes,
I don't
ma'am.
want to lose. Okay. So we don't see the program going away. What do the orchestra students do now since they don't have a room? Where are they leaving their orchestra, their violins and cellos?
The instruments. Well, it's a little bit different on every track.
Okay.
On some tracks, we share space with, like at Westendorf, we use the second small band hall, which works out okay, and the teachers seem to all get along. We've been able to do that on most of our campuses. At Layman Junior High, it's in a classroom, and a small orchestra program, they're almost bumping shoulders with each other. It requires a little bit more room. There's not dedicated storage for instruments, so we always run the risk of damage when something gets knocked over or bumped into, because you just need space. So it's a little bit different on every campus. Like I said, on the gold track, it's at Briscoe in the second band hall. It works out okay, but then the band loses the use of that room for a lot of the day. Shared space is a short-term fix, but a dedicated space with dedicated storage and a teacher work area is really ideal. On our junior high and high school campuses, those programs really should have practice rooms like the bands do. And it's just so that those programs can grow, and we can attract good teachers, because a short-term fix, we can probably sell good teachers to come here, but they do expect facilities that will be equivalent to our neighbors, and we have two big neighboring districts with very strong nationally recognized programs. We can do that here too.
But the students that take orchestra, is it kind of like band? If they can't afford their own instrument, do we find a way to provide them instruments, or do the parents have to incur that cost?
It's a little bit of both, Mrs. Danziger. We have students that rent their own instruments, but we provide a lot of instruments. It's a lot cheaper to buy violins and cellos than it is tubas and French horns.
Okay.
I had a call today from a parent who wanted fourth grade orchestra. She's moving into the district, and my daughter has a cello. Do you provide cellos in fourth grade? No, ma'am, we don't. We don't have elementary orchestra, but we do at sixth grade.
Any other questions?
Fine arts is usually the last thing that seems to get the funding, and it was left off of this completely, off of this bond issue. Is that correct? There's no fine arts addressed at all?
Just the.
It received 67% of that committee's vote. It just didn't meet the minimum that the facilitator set.
You didn't ask for anything else, is what I think you should
No,
say.
ma'am, just this.
Okay. And
That's correct.
that's covering nine different schools.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's basically all the schools.
That will take care of every secondary campus that doesn't have or won't have an orchestra room by the end of next year.
The last bond issue, we actually added it on as a school board. And
Thank you for doing
I
that.
just personally think that fine arts is something that we need to address for the interest of the students, and it keeps them in school. You've been your program, I know, has just grown and grown. So I think it's something that we would need to consider, that would be dedicated to the kids. Saying that, that's a lot of money. And I was looking at some of the things that the advisory committee added, and it doesn't even total that. So as far as the money part, is there any way that could be reduced? Or is that the maximum, absolute amount that would be needed for 9 schools?
You talking about the 12.7 million
Right.
they removed?
I think through the design, square footage cost and that type of thing, that's one of those where you're gonna have a difficult time reducing that number.
Okay.
Because typically, it's not renovating existing space, it's adding additional square footage.
And that's what we did in the last bond though, too, didn't we?
We
We
added.
just kind of took the bull by the horns.
We're adding orchestra rooms at the 4 middle schools. And it was cheaper building costs to put them there. That's why we put them there.
But now that you've seen the program starting to grow.
It's growing. It is growing. Yes, ma'am.
It's probably something we need to think about adding on to all the new schools that we're going to be having in the future.
They are.
Is to include.
Well, they do
They
have
are.
that. Randall and Ryan both have.
Oh,
We
do
were
they?
able to
Okay.
incorporate an orchestra
Yes,
room
ma'am.
in those
Okay.
designs.
So all the other schools going forward, no matter, will have orchestra rooms.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Except for the 9 that
yeah.
question.
So then we'll be done.
No, never done.
Well, done with orchestra. No, we're never
Then
done.
it'll be another program that's come along. and-
But this
That's
program
something.
has really, it took off real fast. A lot of students.
But we have great teachers, and that really helps.
Any other questions about the orchestra? Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we move on, do we have any other questions regarding interior improvements? All right, moving on to technology.
Oh. Did I- I'm sorry.
Sounds like we have one more.
No, I missed the question I wanted about tennis courts. It's
That's outdoor.
That's
You still have
exterior.
time.
Oh, okay.
You're still good.
Just relax.
No, I just needed y'all to laugh, that's all.
So technology
Mission
is next.
Any questions about technology?
One of the proposals was for one-to-one computers, and then there was a proposal for one-to-need computers.
Yes, sir.
Given the current situation of pandemic, do we have enough computers to meet the need of our students that are learning virtually?
Yes, sir, we do. And we're in the process of purchasing additional ones specifically for that as well.
I don't know if I want to bring this up, but I had been told, or that with the summer program and that, and trying to collect these back, some people actually sold their computers.
I haven't heard that yet.
You can have
And the approximate 4,000 that were checked out in the
Uh-huh.
spring, the families had the option of returning them or hanging on to them through the summer. So right now, we don't know which ones we have lost or have disappeared or anything else like that until we ask for them all back. But with moving forward into the fall, we know that a lot of those students will still continue to need those. So I'm not aware of that situation.
I guess, is there a way to monitor, because,
They're all,
I will say that technology in the spring did a fantastic job along with Chad Jones' group. We know every single computer that was checked out, we know who it was checked out to.
Yes.
So if at some point when it needs to be returned, if it's not, we'll have a process to follow up on it.
And if you've heard from, if someone tells you that someone sold a computer or something, if we can know who it is, we'll follow up on it right then.
that's why I hesitated to bring it up, but it's almost like when you give something to someone, how do you make them accountable for returning it? Or the emphasis is that it is school property.
Right, and the same way with a textbook or a library book or athletic equipment or anything else, as long as, like Mr. Genty said, as long as we know who it went to, we know who hasn't returned it yet.
Are you able to, so if a family who took one in the spring did not return it in the summer because they still needed it, and they are choosing in-person school, I assume you would ask for that back in
Yes.
August? Is there any way for you to tell when they log on that, oh, we checked this out to, John Doe, and, oh, yeah, the John Doe's logged on with this computer?
It depends on to what they connected. So if they connected to our network for certain things,
For
then
Canvas
yes.
or for?
Well, but not for Canvas. We would know they're logged into Canvas, but Canvas is a hosted application by Canvas, by the vendor.
Gotcha.
So that does not have to connect through us necessarily. So generally speaking, the answer to your question is no. They're connected to things through their own internet provider. We can see an IP address, for example, of a machine that connected to something, but short of a court order, we can't get Comcast, Xfinity, whatever,
Right.
to say whose address that was. That usually takes a court order. So generally speaking, not so much.
Any other technology questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Exterior.
Exterior, once again, the exterior, what has been recommended is all P1s that were in the facility assessment. And there's a few things that the committee had added. If y'all have any questions on the exterior.
Is this all exterior total? I mean, or is there another page?
There's another page.
Okay.
It's late for me. No, back to George Junior High. Am I not understanding, it says to remove tennis courts? Am I missing something?
Where's George Junior High?
Have Ms. Nelson address that.
And that will come up in
It's-
their athletics.
Oh, that's a different worksheet. Okay. But it's still exterior, so we're
It-
going
it-
with it. We're
it's
going with it.
exterior.
We're going
We're
with
in the
it.
right part. We're in the right
A few
part.
years ago, we made the programmatic decision to play our junior high tennis matches at our high school courts. Our high school courts have bleachers and have lights. There's also many more courts at the high school. So we're able to play our junior high matches faster, we're able to accommodate parents, and we're able to play them once it gets dark. Our high school courts are also in much better shape. That allowed us to reinvest the money that we otherwise would have spent on our junior high courts on those high school courts. So our high school courts have improved dramatically. Our junior high seasons are much shorter. And so now that we're in a junior high district all to our own, we've just slid our junior high tennis season back a little bit. We play it just behind the high school tennis season. That also allows our high school tennis coaches to assist our junior high tennis teams and their coaches. Because of that, the old junior high tennis junior high tennis courts at George Junior High are no longer being used for tennis. And so as a result, they're going to be repurposed. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yes, ma'am.
What will they be repurposed for?
I'll let Kevin answer that.
Parking.
There's lots of other things you could, and one of the thoughts is parking.
Because they need more parking over there.
Yes.
That's the place
Okay.
that's hard to park.
So none of the junior highs have tennis courts? This is the only one left?
George Junior High and Lamar Junior High had their own standalone courts, as did Briscoe at one point. Our newer facilities, we've built them all together. George Ranch, Fulshire, and now at Randall High School, it's a 10-court complex that's built somewhere centrally located between the high school and the junior high.
Okay, so we have the tennis courts at Lamar Junior High and Briscoe presently.
The Lamar Junior High courts are not playable for tennis. They are playing their matches at Lamar High School. At Briscoe Junior High, they have converted several of those courts to outdoor basketball courts. They have a few that are, they have two, I believe, that they're still have nets on for tennis, but they are also playing tennis at Foster High School.
So in a few years later, will y'all be coming back to ask to remove those tennis courts at the other junior highs? If they're not, I guess if it's one junior high, why isn't it all 3 junior highs?
The space at Briscoe is being used for other purposes. They're using it as an outdoor play space during PE and athletics. At Lamar, you'll see that's another bond item to actually rebuild the Lamar High School tennis courts and build a complex for them that puts them on par with the other high schools. It will be at their new sub-varsity stadium complex, which would put it closer to the junior high and make it more equitable to the complexes we have at our other high schools for both the high school and the junior high. And then Terry has the right number of courts, and it's just across from their field house, which makes it a little ways from the junior high, but not really any farther than any of our other campuses.
And as they're aging, it doesn't make sense to be doing maintenance and trying to keep it up when really and truly we're moving away from them.
Our junior high tennis season is just in the spring and runs 4 to 6 weeks. Whereas our high school seasons, there's a fall and a spring season, so those tennis courts get used year-round.
Can you talk a little bit about the site fencing? Like, for instance, at George Junior High, you have up there. I've besides an answer of equity amongst all the campuses, I've driven by that and I've seen the accessibility it is for the community without the current fences. And I think that's a good thing on the weekends and people going out there kicking the ball around and throwing a frisbee with their son or something. So what would putting fences around some of those, I think the same things at Lamar Junior High, if I'm not mistaken. But can you speak to that a little bit? What's the thinking that we need to add fencing to some of those fields? And Taylor Ray has that in the bond. Is that not correct?
There was an ad in Taylor Ray to,
Yes,
for
by the
additional
bond
fencing.
committee.
That was put in by
I
the
drove by that the other day and I saw people out there kicking the ball. I'm thinking that they didn't have to jump the fence or, do anything else like that. So
Yes, sir.
what?
The Citizens Bond Committee, they brought that forward and they reached consensus on that. That was
For Taylor Ray.
For Taylor Ray, that was an ad.
How about at George Junior High?
And George Junior High was more of fencing back at the back of the school where the weight room is, that there's a metal building, and it was providing fencing around that area, so when the students go outside to go to that weight room and back inside, that they have a fenced-in area. That's what that was about.
So that's not necessarily putting a fence around between Navarro and George Junior
No, sir.
High, those
No.
fields that are there and all that area.
No, sir, that's not how I understood that, no.
There was an ad that we'll get to in athletics that talks about some fencing around those those practice fields.
And the fencing at Taylor Ray was brought up by the committee to go around the playground area at Taylor Ray.
Because we already have an item in the bond, in the recommended bond, to fence around the Taylor Ray portable buildings.
I can understand. I don't know what the thinking was there. Fences look good, but it's also good to have access that people aren't climbing over and destroying, so that they're not destroying on purpose, by just by the use. And so,
A few years ago, our board voted to use 2011 bond to put more fencing around several schools.
Yes, ma'am.
Have we completed that money, or is there still money in that? Or did we do all the schools that were needing at that time, or?
That project is complete. I believe it was $485,000, something like that, and that was a fencing project, and we polled the schools, and some schools elected not to put a fence up. And now we're going back at some of those schools that want those fencing.
So some of the ones that said no now are saying yes?
Yes, ma'am.
And now there's no money left in another bond, that they're coming to this bond?
Different types of things, but yes.
Okay,
And some of those things you're referencing are in our safety and security line item.
okay. So, but it's not like we haven't looked at it before. It was the personnel at that school at that time that did not feel like they needed it. Okay.
I have something, Ms. Nelson, if you'll stay for just one second.
Sure.
This is kind of a hybrid of exterior and athletics. I'll
Yes,
go ahead.
ma'am.
Somebody asked me about an outdoor sports covered pavilion. This is at Huggins. Do we have that, is that anywhere, has that been proposed at all by, when y'all did the facilities assessment? Did the principal, anybody bring that up, do we know? I mean, if y'all haven't heard of it, probably not, I'm guessing.
I have not seen it in a priority 1 or 2. I would have to go back and look specifically for it.
Are those
that
ones that we build or usually PTO?
I was
raises money?
thinking the funds usually came from
From PTO. I
and
don't think
that's-
those are things that we as a bond have to.
Okay, so I
Because
just
then
thought
you
I
would
would-
have to turn around and make sure every school had one.
And that is what I thought. I had not heard of it, and so I just wanted to ask the question.
But I think that there are some schools that might have it, but I think they're PTO.
So for the sake of the public understanding, because that question came to all of us, but,
Oh, it
the
did?
schools that
Okay.
have,
I thought it was
the
special.
schools that have coverings over the playground, Dr. Randall, is this correct? That PTOs have paid for those and not necessarily the district budget or the campus budget?
I think that's correct. We may have,
The new facilities, part of that FF&E, the principals have elected to buy that in their FF&E funding to get the sale, I call it.
So-
but it is not a part of when they do the design and the
No, sir.
development and all of those things and come up with the actual cost, that's not built in. What he's saying is that they get an FF&E budget and they make a determination that they're not gonna get some of this so that they can get that.
That's correct.
Thank
But
you.
that's an individual decision by a principal.
The
Yes.
campus. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Or maybe not go so fast because we're gonna go with the pools.
Any more questions on the exterior slides?
Ms. Kaminsky?
What, installing ADA playground ramp? Can you describe, I mean, I know we put some playground equipment, we approved that, but
You're talking at Bowie, correct?
Bowie and
Travis.
Travis.
It's also listed with Navarro, ADA access ramp.
And a
But
lot
it's
of
a
that
play-
is
it says
is providing the sidewalks and the ramps to the playground equipment.
the actual sidewalks.
Because some of them may not have a sidewalk and a ramp going to the structures,
Okay,
and this would be adding some of those things.
that wasn't included when we added on the equipment. Okay.
Well, there's different equipment. There's new equipment that was installed at Taylor Ray, but it was all funded through special needs, and it has all of those things. But this is going back to other pieces of equipment that need the ADA, that don't have it.
Any other exterior? Athletics.
She might as well put Perry High School. Now, do you want to ask a question or I'll ask?
You're up.
When the bond committee replacing the practice pool, is that going to make that pool now look like all the other practice pools of all the other high schools? Is that what the suggestion was?
This recommendation
Yes.
would be removing the Terry pool and building a practice pool like at Fulshire, George Ranch, Foster.
Is that tearing everything down, or is that just tearing the outside and building, or do you have to start from scratch?
That would be a complete new facility.
The pool at Terry is approximately 40 years old.
Yes, I know, I remember,
So-
I know it was built.
So it makes more sense to remove that pool as it's approaching the end of its life, where we're gonna start having maintenance issues with it, and putting in a brand new pool.
Well, I just wonder too, that it's always been kind of an outdoor pool with a bubble. If it changes, when you're actually going to make it an enclosed pool, so you wouldn't really be able to keep what you got, you'd have to start from scratch.
That's correct.
Okay.
So the pool itself is nearing its end of life.
I would say with a 40-year-old pool,
It's probably past the end of its
I
life.
You know what I
I
think
don't
is?
know how long swimming pools last.
I think, can you share the history of how that pool came about? I think it's very interesting when, whoever wants to answer that. I think it explains a lot about.
I'll
the-
let Kevin.
Well, the pool was actually a donation from the George Foundation. It was built in '82, generally around just after Terry High School was opened. And that was before I was here. So. That came with an air structure roof, and that roof was supported by an air handler that blew air into it. And way back when, our maintenance department would line that roof and grab that thing for the warmer months and pull it up into a trough that's up at the top of a structure. Several injuries, several hospital bills, forced us to go to contract that service to put the pool up and take the top up and top down, to where contractors started refusing to do it. Matter of fact, a few walked off the job. We did have some injuries even with the contractors, and it ended up getting more expensive to where it was pushing $50,000 a year to put that pool top up and down until it made sense to leave it off. So now we have an outdoor pool.
Can I add something, Kevin? Once we built the LCISD natatorium here at Lamar, prior to the practice pools opening, we made the decision to leave the top off at that point, because then we could use both pools when the weather was conducive, and when it got too cold, we were able to consolidate into one pool. And with them being this close to each other, it's about 1.33 miles. So we were able to consolidate into this one when weather determined that we needed to. So since then, it's been open air.
So that begs the question that someone asked me, and I didn't know the answer. Since it's so close to the fancy natatorium that we built, seriously, why are we gonna build another structure over there? Why don't we just have them come over here to the natatorium?
Because currently, each of our high schools and each of our high school swim programs has their own practice facility.
So it goes back to equity of the buildings and the facilities.
That would be the decision we'd have to make.
Even though it's a stone's throw away, a mile.
There's a big swimming programs at all the schools, though.
No, I'm not saying it's not necessary, I'm just clarifying that.
It's also our 4th grade swim program.
Well, that's what I was gonna say too. Every elementary school, the 4th grade. I mean, I did it way back in '80. God, when was I in 4th grade?
So that's the
All my
answer.
kids did it.
Yeah.
To have enough students in the program through the 4th grade and the high school program, we need a proper practice pool at Terry High School. And this one is beyond its life, almost.
Well said.
And I think, if I'm not miscorrect, but one of the reasons we got the money to build that pool was because to have the 4th grade program. I think that was a stipulation,
It was, yes, ma'am.
so that's how we got it to begin with.
Maybe they'll build us another one.
Maybe they will build us another one.
They just gave us
I
the
just gonna
grant, so I
say,
think
they
we're
just
gonna,
gave us
yeah.
Hey, you never know. You never know.
Ask
Church Foundation.
Should ask.
They already gave us something.
Later, we'll ask later.
Okay.
Never know. They might want to continue that legacy.
Any other athletics questions? I think we're good. Thank you.
Our next section is transportation.
Mr. Jones? Anyone have questions?
And if it keeps going.
You came all the way in here. I feel bad if we don't have something.
Looking good.
I do not feel bad about it. Thank you.
I just think it's interesting that we just now have a lot of our buses with air conditioning, and now they're telling us to keep the windows down.
Yes.
We're gonna run the air conditioning anyway, with the windows
There you
down.
go.
Yeah, there you go.
Looks good.
How many buses do we have? Air conditioning? Almost all of them.
Carry on.
By the time school starts, we should be just about through with our retrofits. They ran a little bit behind, but every route bus should have AC on it. Some of our spares won't, but every bus is assigned to a route every day.
And all of our new
Okay.
purchases come with that.
So
And will these new 78 buses also already come with seatbelts too?
yes, ma'am.
How many buses do we have?
About 310 in the fleet.
Any other questions?
I don't know why I even put it down, but Terminal 3, is that under transportation?
Well, it's
I
a
don't know where I
major
saw that.
project, and what was recommended was a 3rd terminal. We have one in Fulshear currently, and then the one here in Rosenberg. What was recommended was a 3rd terminal.
And that's in the bond?
That's in the recommendation, yes, ma'am.
But we don't have a location or anything to consider?
Currently, we do not.
Kind of like the ag barn situation?
It would be strategically placed is where the areas that we're looking at. where the need would be. So we already have one in the north side of their district, we have one central, so.
Need one south.
Anyone else? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next is safety and security.
This is provides for a district-wide radio network and for the use of the campuses. Currently, there is really no district-wide communications plan. What you see is a very mixed assortment of radios and different types of communications throughout the districts across the campuses. What this will allow us to do is set a standard district-wide for radio communication. It allows better coordination and communication across the campuses and helps us improve and put together a true safety plan so that whenever there's an incident at any campus, we have instant communications across campuses, across divisions, and across the different departments that would be affected. It also includes bidirectional antennas in all of our secondary campuses, which improves our radio communications with public safety organizations. It is something that is now code in all new facilities, but this would bring our older facilities up to that standard as well.
Any questions?
How about the district-wide fencing upgrades? How does that play into the safety and security?
We put, because it is a security issue, we did group that with it. We have a listing of campuses. Many of them are just requiring additional panic gates on existing fencing. There's a couple campuses that require some fencing, but we have a list of that we added into this item. It's a fairly inexpensive item, so we thought looping it in with this would be the right place to put it.
So what's the price split?
We've got, doing a quick math, you're looking at a roughly right around $100,000 for additional panic gates and fencing. That is, and when it references that in here, that's the added amount.
I can understand around the building. Help me understand it around the athletic areas. Because it says, this book, George Branch High School, has it as a priority 2, so I know it's not necessarily in the bond, but
Correct.
But it is listed as security fencing around the athletic areas with an 8-foot chain link fence.
Right, and it was a priority 2, and it was not in the recommendation.
So had it been a priority 1, what would be the thinking? Would it exit gates and things like that?
Where is it referenced?
It is a priority 2 that's in there, and the consultants that walk the facilities did bring up that, and currently there is a 6-foot fence there that is leaning. So there's some repairs that need to be made. The consultant groups that walked it, generally they put 8-foot fences in those areas, so that's what that recommendation was, and it was put as a priority 2, which we did not recommend.
And we did note that and feel we can do the repairs ourselves. There's a maintenance item that we'll do.
Great. What's throwing me is the word security in that whole thing. I know the athletic field needs fencing. I didn't understand the security aspect of it, but it's neither here nor there since it's not in.
Well, a lot of that is also control, crowd control, things like that, fencing around the softball field and the baseball field, just to make sure that you have people going in the right areas.
On the district-wide campus radio, is there a place that we're gonna house the main that splinters off to all the schools? Who controls that?
Yeah,
Is that part of your department gonna be in your little area?
Well, it doesn't really.
Need an area.
The exact location on where the main controller for the system is, as long as it's somewhere in the district's network.
Okay.
So the actual location isn't really as important as it is the services that it's going to provide to our campuses. We'll be able to improve communications not only across campuses, across the feeder tracks into the secondary campuses, and then, of course, also transportation and the white fleet as well will be included in that.
Any other questions on this one? Thank you.
This is a child nutrition section. I will tell you that in the facility assessment, these did show up as P1s in the facility assessment. The Seguin Early Childhood Center is the kitchen equipment and the flooring and the serving line that was added together. So if you look at the facility assessment, that's 2 line items there to add up to that.
Any questions?
Not on that.
Okay, I think we're good.
And then this is the summary. We're at the summary.
Did
So,
you have- oh, sorry.
on the 4 million on the land that was removed, what did we remove?
That was, the original proposal that was brought forward was 35 million for land acquisition. When the Citizens Bond Committee did not bring forward the event center, we estimated a cost savings of $4 million
Gotcha.
on land.
Correct.
But I know we always have a land budget so that we can go out and buy land ahead of time if we need it. Is that, removing that 4 million still gonna keep that valuable so that you can go buy what's needed
Yes, ma'am.
ahead of time? So, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And is this number, this does not include does this include the stadium?
Yes, ma'am.
Because it was my understanding if we do vote to take the stadium out, it goes as a separate line vote.
That's correct.
So what would that be right now without the stadium?
About 79,
So it'd be six,
You'd have 615.9 plus your technology. So you would take the 82,783 out.
okay.
Because it would be a separate proposition number.
So we voted on this at our August meeting, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Because there's a date that we have to vote on it by. Do we need to do this on the 6th at the special one?
If we do it then, we will meet the timeline for, it has to be done August 17th.
At what point are we gonna have to build a event center?
I think that's a good question to talk to City of Rosenberg, City of Sugar Land, and Portland County in partnership with.
I don't
because
wanna share it, but
There's a lot of limitations if a school district does it versus a county or something as well.
true. But, you know, at this point, we don't even graduate our own kids in our district. Because we don't have a facility to support that indoor or outdoor. Well, I guess Trader could have, but it's under construction.
But at
So-
what point do we want to take it out to see what the public wants? That's kind of what we're doing with the stadium, correct? 'Cause
Well, that was the Citizens
That's
Bond
the
Advisory
bond.
Committee.
right.
That-
But I'm
and they are
saying
the
is,
public.
if we as a board decided, did we want to entertain that? It would also be a separate line item. It would not be part.
That's correct.
Yes.
So it'd be almost like, again, trying to see where the public decides that they're interested for us to
Hmm.
get into the event center business.
We're proposing high school number 7,
Yes, sir.
so at some point,
We're gonna have to do
we're
something.
gonna have to. I guess we don't have to do anything, but I think we're approaching pretty heavy upon that point
Just like
where
with the stadium.
we need something. No?
Well, question, if y'all are saying that the stadium is gonna be on a separate, standing alone, would it be feasible for us to put this down standalone and just see what the consensus is of the public?
Or do we take a chance
I
that
think
people vote everything down?
I think that's a discussion that, when you all are debating what you're gonna do next, whether you're gonna add or whether you're gonna take away or whatever, and then you come up with your final number. But just keep in mind, it may be separate, but the report will be the total number to the community. So even though it's a separate item, the stadium is
Probably not
80-something.
feasible to have all three of these.
80-something million, you got 80-something million plus
Together.
700 and something million plus
If I had a
whatever.
choice.
So I think that's something that you all, you know, when you sit down and start debating what you want on there, that you can have that debate.
In August.
Fair enough.
At our next meeting.
I remember from the Citizens Bond Advisory Committee, one of the discussions was, could we buy the land for the stadium and include enough space that if in the future we wanted to include an event center, that we could have it there? If we don't add the event center now, would that be possible under the recommendation as it sits right now?
Without the 4 million?
To have enough space with what we have right now from the bond committee, would we be able to buy land with enough space to possibly put an event center there in the future? So that way we wouldn't have to do all the, additional parking and infrastructure and all that.
Well, that's a master plan that has not been brought to the board. And it's a program that we would have to sure look at and see if we could manage that. I think when we took that money out because we weren't gonna buy an event center, that reduces the land that you would purchase for a football field, and you would certainly have to look at that.
I think that the funding, I think we could probably pull that off. And when you're adding that type of, there's some negotiation part that goes along with that. Unfortunately, people don't like to sell big sections. But, we work on them pretty hard, so. But it's possible, once they look at the master plan, of adding all of that for it to be done. Because you're just buying the land.
Well, we're hopeful that this evening has assisted y'all. We tried to put together a very detailed process with bringing folks at the table that could answer specific questions regarding programming and also the construction. Obviously, it doesn't end tonight. We're available, Kevin and his staff are available to continue to answer questions and provide clarification as often as you would.
Thank you. Thanks for.
Could I have one question of Jill?
Still have more questions.
I had a question of Jill. When do you start getting nervous at numbers when you?
She's passed.
Yeah, when do we talk about, that's part of my question too.
After COVID-19, I don't think I'm nervous anymore. I think I'm just sick all the time with all the different costs.
Because I know
and
we
things.
talked about last time when we started adding things, you said little bits here and there's not gonna change how you're gonna buy and sell the bonds.
Right. The key thing is, as I had said before, that this is an authorization to sell bonds. When we go into this, we plan to build everything, and eventually will build or renovate everything that's on the propositions. But we do it when it's necessary, when we need the facilities, when the economic environment is right. We sell the bonds, and we're very prudent about it, and we're very mindful of the tax rate and the impact on taxpayers. So, this would be a contract with the voters, and we would, like I said, eventually build every project and renovate everything that we say we're gonna do, but we'll do it at the right time. So,
When was the last time you can remember that we did have to raise taxes to meet our bonds? Because I haven't seen that since I've been here, so.
No, actually, we had a flat tax rate of 35 cents for 6 years, and that's just the INS rate. And it had dropped 2 cents way back in the 12-13 year. It was 37 cents prior to that. We could potentially have to raise the rate as much as 3 cents for the currently outstanding bonds. And actually thought we were gonna have to do it this year, but the values seem to have grown enough. We get certified values in about 2 weeks, maybe less. so it looks like we're gonna be able to stay at the 35 cents. I guess another good thing to look at is, over the past few bonds, we projected that we'd have to raise the tax rate by 58 cents. We've actually only raised it 23 cents. So our value growth has been very favorable for us and has helped us to manage that, plus investment earnings that we've made on the bonds and capitalized interest and stuff like that has helped us to manage our tax rate very well. So, I mean, and all indications are that it'll continue to be that way. The wild card is, of course, COVID and that environment, and we don't have any control over that, but of course, we'll watch that, monitor it, and do what we need to do.
Well, they said housing sales are up more than, it's a buyer's market and they can't keep inventory stock. And one of the ones they said was Katie and Fulton.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Go ahead, Ms. Mitzi. You had a question?
Well, on that part, collections, you know, our taxes went up so fast, and I know there's a lot of appeals. Do you foresee that may be an issue?
The current year, our tax collection rate has been almost identical, if not a little better than last year. But that could be because the bulk of the taxes are collected by February for the 2019 levy. So any impact of this we'll see this fall, you know, with this levy. But every time we've had any type of economic downturn, our taxpayers still pay their taxes. You know, even back when the economy really tanked, we didn't see basically any change in the tax collection rate. So I have every feeling that it'll remain pretty consistent.
So we pass this bond and the public votes to approve it in November, that doesn't necessarily immediately put the bond debt at that number.
No.
Not until we sell it.
Correct, not until we sell. And in the beginning, when we were modeling tax rates, we were looking at probably 3 sales. Actually, we had, I think it was a 200, let's see, we looked at, if we were going to sell $880 million in bonds, we looked at a 200 million sale, a 380, and a 300. So 3 sales, once in March of 21, March of 22, and March of 23 were the estimates. And of course, your tax rate's impacted as you sell.
Thank you for being good stewards of the money.
Yes. Okay, any other questions? Okay, all right, thank y'all so much. So unless there's a need or a desire on the part of any of our trustees, we will not be adjourning to closed session this evening. Does anybody?
Will we have one more discussion about this
Next
meet-
month.
At the next meeting.
Yes.
And it will be on the August workshop, is that correct?
No, it's a special meeting August 6th, am I correct?
Right.
Just for the bond?
No.
No,
it's
no,
finance.
For the
it'll,
finance.
Budget, right?
So we're gonna include a bond conversation in that workshop.
we
have a vote.
That's what we would recommend at this point, and certainly the board can have another special meeting at the way you, for bond, action. But I would say that based on, the discussions that we've had already, that it would be appropriate to just include it as part of the other meeting.
Yeah, all right.
Thumbs up.
Okay, so if we have no further business, the meeting is adjourned. It is, my thing went out, 9:15.
9:13.
9 what?
13.
9:13.
9:13.